Colombia is closer than ever to reaching a final peace agreement, and students march in Venezuela in support of the government's education policies. My name is Reagan Des Vignes, and this is From the South. Thank you so much for joining us. First up, Colombia's President Juan Manuel Santos has asked the Constitutional Court to authorize a plebiscite on a final peace deal with the FARC guerrillas. The far right, led by Senator and former President Álvaro Uribe, has announced that it will campaign against the plebiscite. The government negotiators at Havana explained to the Constitutional Court the importance of giving voice to the people. Humberto de la Calle, the chief negotiator, responded to critics who claimed that the plebiscite is unconstitutional, arguing that it will reiterate the constitutional right to an active participatory democracy. The president also voiced his support for the plebiscite.
I want to hand the peace over to the Colombians, for it to be the Colombians who decide if we keep going on this path we are going through.
In another story, President Santos says a reliable source claims that the 4 missing Spanish journalists have not been kidnapped. According to Santos, the journalists would have presumably entered guerrilla-controlled territory as part of a report they are working on that's based on the ELN guerrillas. The president clarified that authorities are working to confirm that information.
The information I have regarding Salud Hernandez, which I am verifying, is that she went to work on a story of her own will, that she met with the ELN, and that the ALN is waiting to see how to release her.
The Venezuelan House Speaker, Henry Ramos Alup, is again at the center of controversy. Authorities have presented evidence which would link him directly with violence in the opposition protests which took place last week. 2 young men seen in different videos lynching a policewoman have been detained, and one of them has confessed that they had coordinated with the House Speaker. Alup's head of security was also detained after authorities had gathered evidence of the man's involvement in plotting violent actions. And Venezuelan students marched to show their support for the education policies achieved throughout the past 10 years. The march coincided with the protests organized by opposition students who are demanding more education funding. Analysts believe that due to the economic situation, the opposition is seeking to promote more chaos. During the 70s and 80s, military dictatorships across Latin America coordinated to kill thousands of left-wing politicians and leaders. The coordinated murders were executed under Plan Condor. A ruling against 18 former high-ranking officials during that period is set to be issued tomorrow. The historic ruling would finally bring some justice for the massive crimes committed during that period. The former officers are not only Argentinian. Although General Videla and Pinochet, who were from Chile and were the architects of the plan, have already died, many officials are still alive and enjoying impunity. Argentina's Foreign Minister Susana Malcorro is visiting Mexico, where she has hinted at the possibility of Argentina joining the Pacific Alliance. A group of nations is seeking to open the economy through free trade agreements.
Argentina has decided that the world is an opportunity and not a threat. It is an opportunity for us to look out to the Atlantic and the Pacific. Our beauty as Latin America and the Caribbean is that we are people of the ocean, and we're going to work in strengthening our ties to Mexico and also start towards the Pacific.
In Bolivia, coca producers say a new U.S. drugs law violates the country's constitution and their legal right to produce and consume coca. The government says it will lodge a protest at the UN over the law that criminalizes the manufacture of drugs globally if producers know the substances are destined for U.S. market. Our Bolivia correspondent Dimitri O'Donnell reports.
Producers proudly displayed their latest crop of the plant as part of a demonstration against a new transnational US drug law. Authorities from the United States can now seek the extradition of producers like these farmers if they have reasonable cause to believe their product is destined for the US market.
Abajo Socialistas! ¡Abajo!
Defending their legal right to consume and produce the plant in Bolivia, coca farmers say the US has no authority to take action against them.
Bolivia is not a Yankee colony for the coca leaf. This is what we want to say to the US.
The coca plant is considered a sacred part of Bolivian culture. It's been used in Andean religious ceremonies and in folk medicine for thousands of years.
From the bottom of our hearts, we are outraged. Why? Because as coca producers, we have never been drug traffickers. Always, if we make coca, it's in its natural state. It's for consumption and for medicine.
Bolivian law allows limited cultivation for its indigenous population to be sold at legal markets around the country. But coca is also used as the raw material of cocaine, and Bolivia is the world's third biggest supplier of the drug. Authorities say up to 12,000 hectares of excess crops will be eradicated this year.
As producers, we're not going to submit to such decisions as if we were another US state. On the contrary, we are a sovereign country, a country with our own cultures and laws.
The Bolivian government says it will lodge a letter of protest to the United Nations, claiming the law is draconian and flouts producers' rights under Bolivia's constitution.
There are approaches. Through the Foreign Office, we are dealing with the situation by making a formal complaint to the United Nations so that this institution evaluates the international regulation that would violate our rules and sovereignty as a plurinational state of Bolivia.
The US says its aim is to target major narco-traffickers and not small-time coca farmers. But Bolivia's producers are not convinced and say they will continue to defend their rights to grow the crop for domestic consumption. Dimitri O'Donnell, teleSur's, La Paz.
As Peru gets ready for next week's runoff vote, the latest polls show that Keiko Fujimori as the probable winner. The far-right daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori is likely to award a pardon to her father, who is serving a 25-year sentence in jail for crimes against humanity and for corruption committed during his rule. Fujimori has announced a set of neoliberal policies which she will implement during her government. Experts believe that she will continue her father's policy of privatization of public companies. Former President and now lawmaker Manuel Zelaya says he will seek the presidency if current President Juan Orlando Hernandez runs for re-election. Hernandez and his party recently passed a reform which allows consecutive re-election, one of the claims that led to the Zelaya's ousting in 2009. The Honduran presidential campaign has still not begun. The G summit has kicked off in Japan, where the leaders agreed that they need to send a strong message on China's maritime claims in the Pacific. An increasingly assertive China is locked in territorial disputes with Japan and several Southeast Asian nations. China's foreign ministry spokesperson responded from Beijing, saying that the South China Sea issue had nothing to do with the G7 or any of its members. Pakistan's foreign policy chief has confirmed that the body of Afghan Taliban chief Mullah Akhtar Mansour is still in Pakistani custody. He also said that the US drone strike that killed Mansour undermines the Afghanistan peace process. The Taliban chief was allegedly killed by the United States earlier this week.
This action has also undermined the Afghan peace process. On 18th May, Pakistan, US and China had agreed that politically negotiated settlement was the most viable option rather than violence, and efforts should continue to bring the Taliban on the table. This understanding has not been respected.
US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has finally obtained the number of delegates needed to secure the party's presidential nomination. However, Trump will not officially become the GOP nominee until he accepts the nomination at the Republican convention in July. Trump passed the 1,237 mark by one after unbound delegates from North Dakota, Colorado, and Pennsylvania pledged their support for him. Protesters who camped overnight outside the McDonald's Corporation headquarters in Chicago continued their protest while the company's shareholders met. The workers are demanding a $15 minimum wage and the ability to unionize. The push for the minimum wage increase began in 2012 and has grown to become a national political issue. Anti-labor rallies continue in Paris, where police and protesters clashed. Between 18 and 19,000 people participated. Some protesters threw objects such as rocks and glass bottles at police officers, who responded with large amounts of tear gas. 16 people were arrested. The next rally is scheduled for June 14th. At least 100 refugees are feared dead after a boat capsized in the Mediterranean off the Libyan coast on Wednesday. Over 560 people were rescued by the Italian Navy. Some 6,000 migrants trying to reach Europe have been rescued from flimsy vessels this week alone. Opposition leaders of the Democratic Republic of Congo called for a day of nationwide protests against President Joseph Kabila after indications that the elections in November would be postponed. Security forces fired tear gas at demonstrators taking part in a march in the capital after claiming that they were going off the authorized route. Over the past 2 years, hundreds of thousands of people have traveled to the town of Funchal in Portugal to visit the museum dedicated to soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo is considered one of the best players in the world. Visitors to the museum can see trophies, medals and other artifacts belonging to him. And to close this evening, a museum of Russian Impressionist art has opened in Moscow. It features some of the works in the private collection of businessman Boris Mintz, who wants Russia to turn Moscow into a destination for art lovers. The gallery is the centerpiece of a larger business park development on the site of an old Moscow chocolate factory. And that's our news this evening. For more on these and other stories, you can visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. And of course, you can join us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. From all of us here at TeleSur, my name is Reagan Des Vignes. Have a great evening. Bye.